quests in the game which you're expected to be in a group for, and there are even people who try to solo dungeons too. And whilst these are feats of strength in of themselves, well, you're meant to be in a group. The quests I'll cover today are things which are specifically not marked as elite and can easily catch you off guard if you approach them solo, or if you don't read the quest text, because quite a few of these quests do drop hints that you should probably bring more than one person. And it is difficult narrowing it down to just 10, but for me, these are some of the hardest quests to attempt on your hardcore character. But before we go on, a quick word from today's sponsor, Factor 75. I'm told summer is here, which means it's prime grass-touching season, and with Factor 75 you can order and plan your Starting off over in the Western Plaguelands, you will have had a good amount of time on your character when you reach this quest, and have already gotten way further than most will. But in these later game zones are some really nasty quests. The first one I want to touch on is called A Matter of Time. It's a quest from Chromie in Anderhol that has you use a temporal displacer on nearby silos to summon and then destroy 15 temporal parasites. It sounds simple enough, but there are two problems here. First up is the fact these parasites spam a slowing effect, which makes it difficult to escape and totally ruins melee DPS. Second is how many of them can spawn. After you use the displacer, up to 3 parasites can spawn at one time, and after you kill one, there is a chance for another to respawn and take its place. I'm not sure what the limit is on how many can spawn at once and replace others, and I feel as though I've seen about up to 6 total personally. This makes the quest particularly dangerous, as you can't be sure whether there is another spawn coming or not. What I'd suggest doing if you're on a class less able to handle many mobs at once is to use the silos on the southeast of Anderhol. Make sure you're only summoning parasites from one of the silos, and then use the nearby water to reset aggro. This technique worked during Classic, and it still should on Era 2. Next is another quest from the Plaguelands, this time over to the east. It's kind of a surprise the first time you see this person here, but Tyrion Fordring himself is holed up at a small house in the northwest of the zone. He has a huge lore-heavy quest line involving a whole lot of mob grinding and dungeon running. One of the early parts of this quest is named Of Forgotten Memories. It has you go retrieve an item that's been buried outside a crypt to his south, and it seems like a pretty simple recovery quest. But it is not. When you loot the dirt pile, a level 57 named NPC and 3 level 55s will spawn. For some reason, all of these guys do way higher damage than average for their level, in addition to having over 5,000 health each. Simply put, taking on all 4 at once is going to be very challenging, especially if you are under-leveled. The good news is you only need to defeat the 57 to loot the item you need, and there are several ways to do this quest pretty safely. First of all, if you're playing any ranged class in the game, there is a small broken down part of the fence nearby to where you loot the dirt pile. If you run up to this, tap jump and forwards and then do that again, you'll be able to jump over it. The mobs will have to run far around to the side in order to reach you here, so you can simply wear the leader of the robbers down, loot him and then reset the other mobs. If you're a melee, you need to do a split pull on the mobs. In order for this to work, you need to aggro all 4 mobs at the same time with a single attack. You can't pull one mob and have the others aggro off of him and pull on you. That won't work. The best way to do this is via a consumable that deals AoE damage, such as grenades. And even if you aren't an engineer, you still get nades from various quest rewards, so you'll probably have some on you. So you nade the mobs, run away, keep the 57 in combat with thrown weapons and other attacks, and after a while the 57 should reset, leaving you with a 1v1. And you should keep running with a 57, as the 55s might just re-aggro anyway. Or, you know, just run in, blast all your cooldowns, and hope for the best. That can work too. Next is first of the defend against waves of enemies types of quest on this list, called Pawn Captures Queen. It's fairly deep into a quest chain which starts in Tanaris and takes place in Ongoro Crater. This has you use an item to summon mobs in the back of a cave. After using the item, 2 mobs will instantly spawn to defend the hive. Upon defeating them, 3 more will instantly spawn, and when you defeat them, the queen herself will spawn alongside 2 more mobs. The big tip here is you don't need to instantly fight one wave after the other. If you stand towards the entrance of the room, you'll be able to eat and drink up to full health and mana in between each wave. As for the last wave with the queen, you only technically need to defeat her for the quest item, and then you could run away and de-aggro the other 2 mobs, but this is risky. there's a pretty good chance that enemies will have started to respawn back near the entrance of the cave, and you could just be running back into even more danger, so our plan to defeat all 3 waves if possible. Next I want to cover one Horde specific and one Alliance specific quest. These are both very difficult and should be approached with caution on a hardcore character. The Horde one is Test of Endurance, which takes place in 1000 Needles. This is part of a really long quest chain, which during this part has you go into a nearby Harpy cave, another cave quest, get used to seeing them, and defend against several waves of
you hear
enemies.
the call of the hunt, adventurer? You must listen closely, but the call comes from deep within you. Most impressive, adventurer. The claw of Sharptalon could not have been easy to get. The Ashenvale hunt goes well for you. Sharptalon had long terrorized the peons from the lumber camps near its path as they tried to travel here to Splintertree Post. No doubt, once the word gets out that it was you who put down the beast, many rousing songs of your bravery will be heard at campfires and lumber mills across Ashenvale. Adventurer, you have slain all 3 beasts that comprise the Ashenvale hunt. You have brought me adequate proof of their demise. There is no question of your strength and tenacity. The blood of a hunter streaks through your veins, and you should be commended. Please accept this bauble as a sign of congratulations on your mighty deeds done in Ashenvale for the Horde today. May your ancestors watch over you.
Where would you like to fly to?
Be safe.
About in Ungaro. After destroying one of the food crates, you start the encounter, which will summon 2 harpies in the first wave, 2 harpies in the second, 3 harpies in the third wave, and 2 harpies as well as the final boss in the last wave. Each wave comes in really fast, giving you very little time to recover in between each set. The cave also has extremely high mob density and very low respawn times, meaning that respawns will have more or less guaranteed happened by the time you're towards the end of the waves. If that doesn't sound bad enough, they also spam a silence effect, meaning if you're a caster, this quest gets way more difficult as you're stuck wanding for the most part. All in all, you should either overlevel this quest with all your cooldowns and potions available, or just probably consider skipping it if you're a caster. On the Alliance, one of the more dangerous early game quests I can think of is the escort part of the Absent-Minded Prospector. This has you take an NPC around a dig site in search of a relic. Escort quests are already notorious in World of Warcraft, mostly for having mobs which move a bit faster than you walk, but slower than you run. But this one has a whole other level of challenge. First of all, a dig site might as well be a cave as it has 1 entrance and 1 exit. The NPC you're escorting is level 16, whereas mobs in the dig site range from 18 all the way to 21. There are both very fast respawns and dynamic respawns in effect here. Dynamic meaning there must always be a certain number of enemies in the area at one time, so if you are unlucky, you can get rid of 1 golem and another instantly spawns to take its place. I've had this happen to me before. But the real danger here is the trogs that attack towards the back of the camp. You get 1 melee and 1 caster who can spawn up to level 21. This escort quest feels as though you need good RNG to take it on at a level appropriate to the quest, because when you first visit this area around level 17 to 18, good luck. That's all I'm gonna say. Speaking of dangerous escort quests, you can't mention the subject without talking about the chicken quests. There are 3 in total, all of which started from random zone-wide drops in mid to late game areas. Each one of these has a reputation due to the sheer number of mobs that you have to fight off during each of them. But if you are able to do these quests, they give amazing XP, good item rewards, and if you do all 3, you get a mechanical chicken of your own, which you can even trade on the auction house if you want to. For me, the least dangerous chicken quest is in Feralus, simply because 2 of the patrols that you run into are on the road, where there isn't a real risk of pulling anything else. Don't get me wrong, it's not exactly easy all the same, but the mobs you fight tend to be a little bit lower level than you are as well. The second hardest chicken quest for me is the one in Tanaris, and there's only really one difficult patrol to deal with, but it's really difficult. Around where you see a bunch of rocks, there will be 3 high-level Scorpid that spawn, which also apply a stacking poison debuff. The Scorpid themselves will already pose a problem for most players, but there are also several normal mobs roaming the area too, which can easily chain pull in the fight. Oh, and also, if somebody has failed this quest before you, these Scorpids stay alive in the world for ages and just kind of auto-fail the next person attempting the quest. But the hardest chicken escort has to be the one in the hinterlands. There are already dangerous patrols on the road with nearby mobs roaming about, but the bit that makes it challenging is the final encounter against the Vile Branch ambushers. The issue here is that there are stealthed wolves all over the place, and it's nearly impossible to fight both the trolls without accidentally pulling additional mobs into the fight, making things even harder than they already are. There are 2 things you can say about these escort quests, and indeed all escort quests for that matter. Pre-clear where possible. If you know where you're going, you can ensure that the way is safe, apart from the additional NPCs that will spawn. And secondly is sometimes you don't need to fight anything at all. If the NPC you're escorting does not enter combat with the patrol, they will just keep running along happily, and as long as you don't fall too far behind, you will not fail the quest. This can be consistent to pull off once you have a mount, and before that some classes can handle kiting mobs better than others. Mages can take enemies to the side and freeze them forever, and hunters can pull out mobs and feign death, and so on. Next is a quest back in STV called Stranglethorn Fever. This has to be one of the most dangerous defense quests in the game. In fact, I'd say there's only one harder than this. The saving grace here is that this quest takes place outdoors, so you can pretty easily escape if things go wrong. Either way, the objective is to loot the heart of Mok the Savage. Getting him to spawn though can be tricky. First up, you need to collect 10 gorilla fangs to begin the event. The first wave you'll run into is 3 enraged gorillas to deal with. After that, you have a short amount of time to recover before the next wave of 5 gorillas will arrive. You must deal with all of these whilst ensuring that the quest troll NPC remains alive. After that, the last wave of 6 gorillas, including the boss, will come. Now this is kind of the easiest wave, as you no longer need to keep the NPC alive and only need to defeat the named mob, Mok the Savage. So you can just hide out of line of sight or in stealth, wait for the gorillas to engage the NPC, and then pull out Mok by himself, defeat him, and then run off and reset the rest. As a tip on this quest, the next wave won't spawn until all the gorillas from the last one are defeated, so keeping one mob CC'd or at low health and waiting for cooldowns is a very viable tactic. Next is an escort quest you should probably skip unless you've seen how it works firsthand, because what the game pulls on you here is kind of just not very fair, and I've seen so many hardcore deaths on this quest. It's none other than Get Me Out of Here in Desolace. It has you lead a level 39 NPC out of a centaur camp. The first patrol you have to deal with is a set of 4 level 40 centaur, though if you hang to the left of the pathway, the NPC should be able to just about avoid them without you having to intervene. The problem here is the second patrol, which has 3 centaur and 2 hyena pets. This pack is nasty for so many reasons. The hyena can see through stealth, so don't even think about sneaking past them, and the centaur disarm as well as spam a net, so it drastically cuts down the DPS of meleeers and makes it very difficult to escape in general. This also makes kiting the mobs to the side problematic if you end up getting rooted at a bad time. It's worth a try if you want to have a go at a challenging quest, but you really do have to go out of your way to pick this one up. Next, it's back to Stranglethorn Vale again. There's quite a few hard quests in this zone, for the last part of the quest line named the Bloodsail Buccaneers. So the earlier parts of this quest have you investigate the Bloodsail and defeat some swashbucklers. You usually do this around level 41, maybe 42, and then you get a follow-up quest to assault the Bloodsail ships, which are just anchored off the coast of Stranglethorn Vale. You have to fight your way inside each of the 3 separate ships, which both have extremely high mob density, fast respawn rates, and way higher combat levels compared to the rest of the zone. To top it off, the objective of the quest is to defeat the captains. Each of these captains have been bumped up a few extra combat levels, ranging from 46 all the way to 48. So taking on this quest as soon as you can after having done the previous one is incredibly risky. Also, there is a little gap in the ship's stairs as you head down below deck, and if you get unlucky, mobs can see through there and aggro and end up chain pulling 3 or 4 others, leading to a situation that can very quickly get out of hand. This quest is one to come back to at a higher level for sure. Honourable mention to a quest here, which isn't exactly difficult per se, it's just impossible to do it without dying. As part of the Lincoln quest chain that starts in Ungoro Crater, you have to create a Vidaire elixir. If you use this while standing in the graveyard in Tanaris, it will instantly kill you, allowing you to speak with a ghost to continue the quest chain. So yeah, goes without saying, you probably don't want to be doing this on your hardcore character. And finally, is probably the hardest quest in the entire game to do at a level appropriate to it. Honestly, I don't know what Blizzard was thinking with this one, but it combines elements of every dangerous quest possible into one. You're defending versus waves, you have little recovery time, you're in a cave, there are fast respawns, there are mobs that run in fear at high speed, you have a very small area to fight in, the list just goes on and on. It's a random out-of-the-way quest in the Stone Talon Mountains called Gorenzo's Orders. You've probably not even ever done it, or maybe even seen it. The first wave you have to deal with are 3 kobolds which are around level 20, not too bad that. Followed shortly after by 4 more, all around level 20. This time you have 2 meleeers and 2 casters. This second pull is a lot harder due to the increased damage you'll be taking from the casters. The final pull is 4 level 23 to 24 kobolds, including one with an aura that increases the attack speed of nearby allies by 25%. This is a level 22 quest, by the way, which makes it so much more difficult since your class will be lacking certain key defensive or offensive abilities. And even if you try to kite mobs out of the cave during the quest or pre-clear, respawns will happen during this quest because they just happen that fast here. If there was ever a quest to just skip, this is it, or just really overlevel it. I mean, you do get a decent pair of mail boots out of it, but I'm not sure they're worth the risk. Anyways, those are 10 of my quests which I reckon are the most challenging in Classic to go into unprepared on a hardcore character. It's definitely difficult to narrow it down just to 10 since there are so many that can be problematic, but I tried to go for ones here which more or less any class will spec in the game. The Warlock was my pick for Classic's release back in 2019, and overall the class I've put the most time into. I even ended up leveling a second one to see what questing was like on the Horde, and I don't regret it one bit. With a mix of unique utility, damage over time spells, and a demon to help leveling, the Warlock is a class that offers a surprising amount of supportive tools, given their reputation of mainly being a damage dealer. As always, there's going to be plenty to cover here, so let's make a start on the Warlock in Hardcore Classic WoW. But before we go on, a quick word from today's sponsor, Wizard 101. Wizard 101 is a nostalgic free-to-play MMORPG set in the universe of The Spiral. Build a deck and take on strategic turn-based combat in both PvE and PvP encounters. Through various spell cards you summon beasts and effects to buff yourself, as well as debuffing and damaging enemies. Master 7 different schools of magic, each with their own benefits, such as fire or ice, all WoW. Now, you would expect a Warlock, being a pet class, to be quite new player friendly. However, somewhat counterintuitively, I think they are not as safe as people make them out to be. One of the largest reasons for that is how you deal damage and how your demon generates threat. See, when you're on a hunter, just as a comparison, if you over aggro your pets and you instantly stop attacking, apart from your damage tick from Serpent Sting, your damage output goes to 0. Your pet who uses focus will then nearly always get aggro back with their next cast of Growl, and then eventually on the hunter you also get Feigned Death to make resetting easy mode. On a Warlock, you know what you have running on a mob if you're fighting it? Damage over time effects. If you over aggro, your pet is probably not going to be able to catch up because you're still doing a whole bunch of damage without actively having to attack your target. Curse of Agony even ramps up in damage over its duration. Your Voidwalker, assuming that's what's tanking, will also use mana, and eventually they will run out of mana, or their spell-based taunt gets resisted, which, seeing as Torment is a shadow spell and some mobs have high shadow resistance, it will feel as though it's getting resisted a lot more than a hunter's pet Growl would. Also, Torment baseline is straight up worse than Growl. It just generates less threat, and you have to spec into improved Voidwalker to make it better. Also, hunter pets as a tank do way more damage, have better resistances, attack faster, move faster, and yeah, so on and so forth. But then again, you don't have to just use the Voidwalker. Part of the Warlock experience is using the correct demon for the job, and we'll be talking more about that during talents later. Warlocks also have their class fantasy of trading something for power. One of the ways you can overdo this for sure is via life tap, and since Warlock spells are quite costly, you're going to be using this ability a lot. Sometimes too often in the face of danger, when instead you should be wanding and preserving your health a little more. We'll be taking a look at some of the stats for the success rate of Warlocks in the Hardcore Challenge later, but as a newer player, this class is trickier than you would expect it to be. So how does the Warlock perform when questing solo?